Hello, my name is Marcos Militas. I am here with Carrie Eleveld. Welcome to our weekly show about politics, Daily Kos is the Brief. We have a great show for you today. We're going to be talking to Chuck Todd of MSNBC and NBC about the effect of Trump on the media, how the media evolved over the 4 years of the Trump presidency. We're also going to be talking to Dave Neiwert. He's a Daily Kos staff writer and one of the nation's foremost authorities on the militia hate crime, the militia white radical movement. And obviously that's relevant not just because of the assault on the Capitol, but because of that ongoing threat today, tomorrow, and into the foreseeable future. And Carrie, it seems that even Republicans are starting to get a little freaked out about this movement. Is that right?
I think so. And, you know, I don't take any glee in it because there's a real problem, you know, surfacing with the white supremacy and white nationalists and these sort of like these radically sort of right-wing extreme groups. But suddenly, you know, you've got Mitch McConnell goes to the Senate floor today and says the mob was fed lies. Who fed the mob? You know, who fed the mob lies? I mean, he said specifically they were provoked by the president and other powerful people, but he like made a distinct break today with Trump. And on top of that, you have this audio that was leaked today from House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, where he explicitly tells his caucus not to invoke the names of other members during their broadcast appearances, TV, radio,
even
whatever.
Democrats, right? He's saying don't even attack Democrats.
And he said Republicans, Democrats, or even anyone who isn't a member of Congress, just don't say their names. And he said, you know, I get these briefings every week, and I've never seen anything like what I'm getting right now. I mean, that's a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. And, you know, it seems to me that audio was leaked for a reason. And those reasons could be multiple, but one of them could be, of course, that these threats are serious and they're trying to make a serious effort now to tamp them down. But the other one is to help limit his own liability in terms of, you know, what might come out related to this insurrection, who stoked it, who's responsible, who collaborated. And I think I think that the Republicans now want to be on record saying, you know, I wasn't a part of this and I tried to tamp it down.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. I think this is actually a real serious, grave threat to our nation. And this is not being sarcastic. We're not being facetious here. This is actually something that there are a lot of different institutions in our country bear a responsibility for helping to stoke it, but also are now part of the solution, whether that's deplatforming off of social media companies or even the traditional media outlets. And so I think that's a good segue, Carrie, to introduce our first guest. He is Chuck Todd. He is the political director at NBC News. He's a moderator of Meet the Press and host of Meet the Press Daily on MSNBC. He's getting ready for tomorrow's big inaugural coverage. And he's joining us here for a little bit of time to talk about the media and how it has evolved these last few years. So Chuck, such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey man, you've been a wonderful guest for me so many times. I think it's time to pay it forward, right? Or pay it back.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely great. And it is really a little bit weird to have that sort of reverse roles, but I'm kind of digging it. I gotta admit, I'm kind of digging it. So,
well, I'll let you know if I dig it in about 20 minutes. So
no, you know what? The internet might let us know whether or not they dig it in about 20 minutes.
God love the internet. The internet. Oh, lovely. No.
Everybody's a critic.
Everybody is a critic.
So sort of the first question is, there was a clear evolution in how the media covered the Trump administration and the Republican Party and the Republican movement in general over the 4 years of the Trump administration. It really sort of kind of came to a head late last year. And in the Daily Kos post that I wrote to promote this segment, I actually pulled a clip of you and Ron Johnson where you just sort of seemed to have completely lost it and said, stop trying to make Donald Trump happy, answer the question I am asking. So how do you, from the inside, having lived that, how did that evolution happen? And do you think it was good for the American people?
Look, that's the question I don't know the answer to, Marcos. And I say this, I think there was no rule book, right? What it is that we're supposed to do. And look, I'm not gonna, I've always viewed Meet the Press that I'm a custodian, right? And there's this heavy history with it, right? So it sits there. So I'll be honest, the last thing I want to do is get in arguments with anybody on air, right? I've always thought, and I hate this word, I was described at it and I hated it when it happened, but I actually respect why the description was used, that we're sort of considered a bit erudite, right? Okay. And in some ways, fine. That's the Sunday shows. And there is not, this is not to say that at its best, it should be, right? That's okay. It should be accessible, but yeah, you hope, and it's, that you have a whole bunch of smart people, having, explaining, why they support X or why they support Y. Look, Donald Trump turned this all into a contact sport to a point of absurdity, right? And in hindsight, we can all talk about this evolution. I tried this last Sunday, just on the violence, imagine had we reacted another way after Gabby Giffords got shot, right? And so, in hindsight, we shouldn't have accepted this premise that this was a one-off, isolated incident. This isn't the start of something. Well, now, when you look at it over a 10-year period, this was the beginning, and we had a crossroads, and it looks like the Republican Party took the other road. And so I don't want to sit here and say there was just a moment, it's sort of like I used to joke, I want to have my Samuel L. Jackson Snakes on a Plane moment, enough is enough. I just want off this goddamn effing this, right? I'm tired of this, this effing lies and this effing plane and blah, blah, blah. And so, it just sort of, and look, and here was the double-edged sword with it. And I don't know, I think that tactic, while I think the viewers were uncomfortable. It chased a lot of Republicans off of television from doing this anymore. So in that sense, I felt as if, okay, that is why we have to do this every once in a while. You have to make this unacceptable.
That moment in particular, Chuck, you're saying you got.
What I would say is, if you recall, there's sort of during the Ukraine debate, I had 3 different Republican senators who came on, and almost, and the last one came on purpose, trying to pick a fight and raise money off of it, and that was Ted Cruz. I will, but anyway, if you recall, I had John Kennedy, Ron Johnson, and Ted Cruz. It was sort of like bing, bing, bing. And it was within, I would say, 3 out of 6 weeks. And they kept trying to go down this road. And I just got very aggressive in ways that people hadn't been used to seeing me do it. And I'm not going to, we can debate about whether I should have done it sooner or not. I am, trust me, I am comfortable getting critiqued, and I question my own actions a lot. But I actually think that it cowed these folks from at least attempting to spread this crap on mainstream. Mm-hmm. However, it did send them all to Fox Business and Fox, and then of course that was back when, remember, in the good old days of 2019, when Newsmax and OANN were a little too much for the Republicans, right? now, but I'm for the Ron Johnsons of the world.
Yeah, right.
And so look, whether it was healthy or not, and this is a question I have, it scared a whole bunch of Republicans from even coming on air. And it wasn't just my show. It was just all the mainstream Sunday shows, right? Jake Tapper and I talk about this. Margaret Brennan and I talk about it. Chris Wallace would have a little more luck getting them, but even he wasn't getting that many of and these folks just decided to hide because they were afraid of admitting, we know what it is, right? They don't want the base to know they don't buy into the crap they've been selling them.
Sure.
But Ron Johnson, John Kennedy, and Ted Cruz did for some reason. And, the Ron Johnson one, by the way, is still something that it's one of the great riddles of the United States Senate. Ask any senator that's been there longer than 6 years, and they will just sit there and say, we don't know what happened to this guy. All the other ones that went down this road, Ted Cruz, you see what he's up to, right? Talk about a guy who is he has tried to politically play the angles of the Trump era, right? And he's missed it every time. Had he had it, and it's proof he has no principles. Because if he had a principle, imagine Ted Cruz having never changed his political profile from that convention speech in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like that, but the point is that we now learn the guy goes from calling him a pathological liar to being the victim of one of the worst fake news trashings we've seen, to then doing his bidding 4 years later. It's
right.
of all the transformations, it's among the most remarkable, but weirdly enough, it actually fits he's always made political decisions, right? You can tell it's always like, what will help me in the moment? And he thought in 2016, Trump was going to lose, right? That's why he's
opportunism. Yeah. Let me ask you something. So we, looking back, there's reflecting on what happened, but going forward, so Trump's going to be gone out of office. Fingers crossed. We're still trying to get it through the 24-hour period here. Yeah, but
ask me again at 12:01.
Right, exactly.
By the way, I was just doing some parent-teacher conferences today with, it's very convenient for the schools to do it today for everybody except people like us, right?
Yeah.
And any of the teachers were like, is it 12 o'clock yet? Is it 12 o'clock?
Exactly. So Trump's going to be gone, but Republican lawmakers are still going to be there, many of whom underwrote all the lies that Trump told. And so I do wonder if, Washington journalists should start to reevaluate how they approach and cover Republicans moving forward. And because let me just say, the assumption has always been, as a Washington journalist, and I used to be one, that when you're covering people on the Hill, everyone's moving within a similar framework of trying to get ahead in representative democracy, right? Trying to gain a political edge so that you can get reelected, win the next election, become the majority, etc. And what we now know is Trump unequivocally proved that he didn't necessarily want to be, need to be reelected. He just wanted to be president for life, as he put it. And 147 House Republicans and 8 Senate Republicans signed on to that vision even after the storming of the Capitol. They didn't care that there was no evidence of fraud. They objected to the results. So I just wonder, should Washington journalists be reevaluating how they're approaching these Republicans in particular? And it's not a small group.
No, it's not. Look, I will say something here. I've always said this. There are people that I'm going to tell you I'm never going to have on Meet the Press, but I will never say they're banned, because you just never know when you need to have somebody on for whatever reason. So I'm always careful not to do that. And frankly, I don't want to give somebody the satisfaction to raise money off of it or to try to have a grievance. You know what I mean? We all know. I mean, I've seen some of my buddies at other news organizations, when you single people out individually, you're actually handing them a fundraising tool. And I'm not interested in helping on that front. But I think I will tell you this, I do not think anybody that was a seditionist has a role in the democracy right now. Okay, that is so I don't know if their opinion deserves a platform here. They have constituents. And so what I think my job and our job is, in fact, I was just having a longer meeting about coverage going forward, where we said to ourselves, we need to focus on who the 74 million people are and what they are hearing and listening. But it doesn't mean their views deserve equal airing, if that makes sense, when it's false views, right? When it's not that. But it is important to know, hey, that representative has a constituency that 70% thinks is QAnon, right? Or something like that. So I think they have lost their ability to be taken seriously in policy debates, right? I think that to me, what they did here, they propagate, especially, I don't, of the 140, if we put them in a lie detector test, how many of them do you think actually believes what they said about the election? I do think maybe 5 or 6. What do you think?
Yeah,
I would say both. But Gosar and Boebert and
I think Gosar believes it, right? I do.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think it's a little bit bigger than what you're giving credit for, actually.
I'm hopeful that it's just 5 or 6
with the House freshmen. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a low end. I think it could be many more than that, but not 100. Not 100. So.
And so, to me, if you knowingly are that cynical and you've knowingly done this, then how can I trust anything you say to me about what your position is on trade, right? Or what your position is on immigration? So I do think reporters, look, and I'll tell you a debate we have all the time, which is sort of like, okay, how much perspective from the Trump point of view should be on Sunday morning, right? On one hand, there's 74 million people. On the other hand, it's not a factual basis. They're not arguing a point on a factual basis. Like I had a member of Congress on today.
You can't even say they're conservatives, right? They're not even conservative. If they threw that away when they start supporting Trump.
Look, there's a reason David French is doing what he's doing right now, right? He's not. He feels as if, hey, I thought I was a conservative. Steve Hayes, those guys, they thought they actually were getting into journalism that from a conservative perspective, but they actually believed it in an ideological way, and they found out they were in the minority, right? So, look, I think ultimately, I don't want to make this about whether you put Trump people on or not. I think we have to be realistic in what is the actual debate. We shouldn't and I think one of the mistakes that the media has done over the years, and I think, frankly, the Democrats have done as well, is they let the Republicans frame the arguments quite a bit on various policy debates, particularly on immigration and healthcare. And it is one of those things that I think that our job is to say, okay, this policy initiative, its goal is to do what? Okay, if it's to expand the coverage of healthcare. All right, are there 3 or 4 different ways to do it? Fine, let's get people that are representative of those 3 or 4 ways to do it. One person might might believe you do it all in the private sector, and here's a market-based idea to do it. Okay, fine. One person says, no, it's all Medicare for all. Let's stop this. I do think, and this is something that I'm saying it here, hold me to it in a year, but I want to get back to tackling issues that way, which is, it's not about whether there's a left or a right. Is there multiple ways to solve this problem? And if there is, well, then let's hear the multiple ways. Try to get out of the left, right, red, blue paradigm. Now, it's hard because of how, frankly, how close our current politics is, right? How narrow the House is, how narrow the Senate is. So it's not as if it doesn't animate or certainly doesn't inform.
The process is going to be important when you don't have a margin.
And so, I'm mindful of that, but I do think if all of us go at policy debates that way, in some ways, there won't be many of the Trump insurrectionists that'll be worth your time anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I will say that the frame you're looking through seems reasonable enough to me in a Biden administration. It wouldn't work in a Trump administration
because it didn't work.
Of the just constant spew of disinformation, right? It was just a miasma of disinformation just all the time. But in a Biden administration, you could legitimately do what you're doing. And I think you could get away a little bit from, this is what the left says, this is what the right says, because there's going to be a factual basis.
There's going to be two. And not only that, there are going to be competing left of center ideas to solve
we
some
know
of these
that.
problems. No. I mean, in some way, look, I actually have this theory that if we broke up both parties in half and created 4 major parties in this country, we might have a healthier political system right now. And you might actually, if everybody knew that you had to make a coalition to attain power, then you would actually be more open to coalitions to enact, but look, we're a country that's going to get stuck in this 2-party system whether we like it or not. I know that, but there is a part of me that thinks on policy, I wish sometimes we were divided into 4, because then you might have a more honest discussion.
So the insurrectionists are almost like the easy question, right? It's how do you handle the insurrectionists? Well, we ostracize them. They are literally insurrectionists. What about the more nuanced, subtle sort
The
of
enablers.
well, definitely the enablers, but they're yeah, that's a whole even conversation. But I'm just talking about people who just flat out pretend they didn't say what they said they did, just flat out lie. And there's definitely more of a culture of fact checking now than there was 4 years ago. And I actually think that's something that I hope really continues moving forward, even if it's my side being impacted. Sure. And I say that because I know for a fact that my side is not going to be the most impacted by fact checking. But is that something that at least institutionally at NBC and at MSNBC, is that something that you plan on continuing, is to be aggressive in challenging facts?
Yeah, I'll take it another step, Marcos. One of the things, and frankly, I'll admit sometimes it's a coping mechanism, but one of the things that I think members of the press ought to remember is we're not here to be popular, right? We shouldn't try to be popular. I go back to one of my favorite pieces of journalism advice, actually comes from the movie Almost Famous, right? Philip Seymour Hoffman tells the kid, don't be friends with the rock stars. The rock stars are not your friends, right? And it's like everybody who plays access journalism on Capitol Hill, no matter how good that source is, someday that source is going to come. Your integrity is going to get challenged because that source is going to want payback, right? It is. Look, it's the challenge of being a journalist, right? You got to know, boy, all right, these sources, can we have a dispassionate relationship and still have a trustworthy source, or are you gonna let that go? I got a lot more comfortable. I'll be flat on honest when I sort of said, look, people are going to get angry with me. That's okay. People are angry sometimes at the messenger. I got to accept it. If you worry about it too much, then you will start to almost cater to the critics too much, right? In that you're trying to, if that's all you're hearing. And so I think if we sort of keep this attitude, look, just before Trump took office, I had already decided not to go to Washington dinners anymore. I've always thought the look of us in tuxedos while America's suffering in some form or another, and it's us hobnobbing and all this stuff. And it was really uncomfortable. And I understood why so many people, whether it's you guys or viewers or anybody else, would say, God, you guys are all too cozy. And the answer is yes. That's 100% true. And what the Trump era did was make it a lot easier to basically disengage from social
Washington. Stay that way though, right? That's a challenge.
It's got to stay that way. Yes.
Biden, everybody likes Biden.
Everybody likes Biden. Jesus, I got, both of my kids, they asked me permission. It was really cute. But both of my kids, when he used to throw these press parties during the summer when he was vice president. And I brought my kids, and you know what Joe Biden did? He played squirt guns with my kids and everybody's kids. This is what he did, right? This is Joe Biden. It's why he's America's grandpa. And they have these great photos with him. And so when he won the election, my daughter's like, can I post this on Instagram? I'm like, go, it's not about me. It's like, this is you're 16 now. You're a person. I got no issue with it. And so there's no doubt. And I don't, here's the thing. I think we all want to get along with the people we have to work with every day, whether they're people in our business or the people you cover, because we all want a normal society, right? But I will say this, I think this reset that Trump gave us, I hope it's something we sort of keep for a while. As much as it's going to be tempting to re-engage socially, I think it would be healthier if we kept some dispassionate distance. In the long run, it will only help our credibility in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Early on in my career, and obviously we're a liberal outlet, but there's a lot of pressure for me to move to DC to be closer to all the sources and the gossip and I resisted that because it's a lot easier for me to criticize Democrats out in California when I don't have to run into them anywhere. Because
the more you and I have gotten to know each other, the harder it is for you and I to criticize each other, right? I mean, I say this, It's human nature. Absolutely. Look, I'm somebody who thinks, I know there's an expiration date. I believe I have an expiration date in my job sooner than maybe other people do, because I don't want to get comfortable, and I don't want people to get comfortable. I think I'm a believer in beat rotations. I'm a believer in all of those things at a newsroom, because you actually don't want too much. I want expertise, but not social familiarity. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I mean, that was something I always fought with in Washington, was not getting too, in fact, I had less trouble with, am I getting too chummy with the, am I getting too chubby? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Am I getting too chummy with the lawmakers? And more, am I getting, because I was covering LGBTQ, issues specifically, am I too chummy with the advocates, the people who are supposedly supposed to be pushing the lawmakers, pushing the White House? I actually never ended up getting very chummy with them, because I was constantly so critical of them. They hated me. So, but
never enough, right? Yeah,
never enough. But I was, I struggled with not being too close, not being seen as too close. And I remember when I moved there, I was offered by the Obama White House a chance to go through and take a tour of the White House. And I said, are other media doing it? Because I'll do it if it's a media tour of the White House so that I can see what the White House is like, then good, I'll do it. But if it's just LGBTQ, journalists I'm not doing it. So I never did it. So
by the way, the hardest invite that I turned down from the Obama White House, but it was for the same reason, is Obama decided to, apparently the 72 Miami Dolphins, I grew up in Miami, the 72 Miami Dolphins never got a White House visit. So anyway, they said, hey, do you want to be on the other side of the rope? Essentially, right? There's always a press rope. And I said, personally, yes. But I thought professionally, it was just wrong. And, so I didn't do it. And, I got my autographs the way every other member of the press corps had to do it, type of thing. But it is one of those things that we're all human beings. We all have our own interests. We all have our own. And now that said, I am a believer in the old axiom in journalism that I think we don't do enough of in political journalism, which is comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, right? And in that sense, I think we've got to be advocates for certain groups of people, even as if we're not advocates for individuals, if that makes sense.
So, Chuck, we're almost out of time here. So I want to give you a chance to talk about the coverage that you will be helping take part of tomorrow on, I think, MSNBC or NBC proper.
I'm on the NBC side for tomorrow. I go back and forth, but tomorrow I'm on the NBC side, and MS is doing their side.
You'll have team wall-to-wall coverage of Donald Trump's military send-off.
You know what? No. And it's actually, we've had an answer. No, the answer, look, I do not believe. This has been another difficult conversation every media executive and journalist has had.
That was a difficult conversation?
Oh, yeah, because, in this respect, there is this, well, he's the president, right? There's always this, well, he's the president. And I do think everybody has gotten to the place of, you can't put him on live television. That's irresponsible. I believe that our stance on this is we're going to cover it. We're going to air what we think is newsworthy to the viewers. But he is not getting live access to any platform.
Good. And then more seriously, if you want to talk about a little bit about what you will be covering, it starts early, right? It starts.
We start at 7. I mean, it's all it's funny. It's like I'm curious what we will be covering, because there isn't you're not going to have, we're going to have the White House usher greet the Bidens at the White House, right? There's going to be, it'll be interesting. It's going to be an all-day reminder of how classless Donald Trump is.
I'm okay with that.
That seems fitting.
But because every moment we're going to have to note, we're going to be like, oh, and here's the traditional, well, no president. Here's the, no President Trump. It will be a serial reminder all day of just how un-American he's acting. I don't know any other way to put it. It is, we have a lot of fights in this country about politics and polarization. but we all thought there was some agreement on the story of America. This is the first president where there wasn't. And in that sense, I think it'll be a constant reminder of how unusual and frankly, hopefully an outlier this 4 years was.
So you can catch Chuck Todd tomorrow on NBC News covering the inaugural. You can also catch him on weekends on Meet the Press and daily on Meet the Press Daily. Do you sleep?
Monday's my weekend. Monday's my weekend.
Thank you so much for joining us.
That's all right.
Real pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks,
Yep. Good to see you.
So,
I love the tomorrow will be an all-day reminder of how classless Donald Trump is.
Yeah, that's actually. I mean, it's true that it's a dawn of a new day. We're going to be talking about all the executive orders and all the legislation introduced in the new Democratic Congress, and there's a lot to look forward to. But that is true, like you said, that is a very fitting send-off for the most classless individual probably in this entire country, bar none.
Yeah. Yeah, and they wouldn't be talking about it if he had done something classy, like do the norm, show up, greet Jill and Joe Biden at the White House, and attend the inauguration.
Hard.
If he it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be hard. He could have.
Obama did it to Trump.
I know. Every president has done it.
Hard.
Every president, except him. So
yeah.
Anyway.
But I also like this notion of blacklisting the insurrectionists, and even we didn't get too far into it, but also talking about the people who enabled that as well. I mean, I think that's going to be an important part of sort of purging American society of these seditionists and getting back to what he called about the shared story of America, which really, I mean, what blows me away is that Daily Kos existed when John McCain ran for president, when Mitt Romney ran for president, and they were like the enemy, right? Like, holy crap, we got to do everything we can to win these elections. And now we're like on the same side, and we shouldn't be on the same side. We should be able to battle have these ideological battles over ideas and what role does government have in making people's lives better, et cetera, et cetera. And we can't even have those arguments anymore because now we're arguing over basic democracy.
Right. There's a couple of things I just want to say real quick, which is I think part of what Trump did was not only did he not believe in the shared story of America, he helped us uncover the fact, for those of us who sit in slightly more comfortable positions, in particular being white, right? Or for me personally, right? Is that the shared story of America is actually much more brutal than we think it is. It's actually been much more difficult for a lot of people than we think it has been. And so it's been nice to have this sort of, for some of us, it's been a privilege to have this sort of glossy shared story of America. Oh, I've finally done it. I ticked Marcos off and he's out of here. No, just kidding. So disappeared from screen for a second. Anyway, it's been a privilege for some of us to have this sort of glossy vision of what America is, but what Trump exposed is what America really is, which is not all that great. I mean, sure, we have great potential. We've done some great things. The nation has moved in very positive directions in a lot, over the years to become, as Obama always talked about, a more perfect union as was intended. But, there's a lot of seedy underbelly there. There's a lot of dark corners. And
that's 72 million, right? That was the biggest sort of
74 million. Yeah.
That part, and it was more, right? It was 13 million more people than voted for Trump last time. So people who saw 4 years of Trump and said, yeah, I want more of that.
Yeah.
That is the problem. So this whole idea, that's not who we are. It is exactly who we are. The question is, can we be better?
Can we be better? And it is worth knowing what's underneath there in order to be better. I mean, sometimes you got to take a stark look in the mirror before you can actually be best, as Melania would say.
Carrie, I want to get to Dave Neiwert, but there's a question from Facebook from Joseph Mallory Chuck, who asks, can you name anyone associated with the Trump administration whose reputation has not been tarnished? And I would say somebody who was appointed by Trump. So the easy answer is Fossey, right? But no, he was there already. So is there anybody appointed by Trump whose reputation has not been tarnished.
I'm literally searching for anyone I can think of who got anywhere close to Trump, and I'm not even just thinking appointees, and wasn't just ruined by it. I mean, is there anyone whose profile got raised? I mean, I think maybe you could say that someone who was already did not have a great reputation except among white supremacists, someone like Stephen Miller, I guess after he leaves the White House, after tomorrow, right? When he was already so sort of egregious as a person that he maybe within the white supremacy circles, he gained, it's not like there was a reputation to tarnish. So maybe he gained
like John Bolton, he quit, but he was already a horrible person. I mean, I'm actually having a really hard time. Maybe Haskell at the CIA?
Yeah, I think, yes. I mean, I don't know what her.
She didn't go along with trying to steal the election. She challenged Trump as far as we know.
As far as we can tell. I mean, I think there's a lot of lefties who would say Haspel isn't their most, flowery picture of a person anyways.
But, nobody is.
Right. She's head of the CIA. So, but no, I think you're right. She pushed back. And I also think I don't know that she was his top pick. I think they needed someone, and I do think Senate Republicans probably strong-armed him a little bit into doing something relatively normal there because it wasn't going to work to have an acting person. Yeah.
Which is who we would have wanted. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's bring on our second guest for the show. He is Dave Neiwert. He is a writer at Daily Kos, but he's also one of the foremost national experts on the white supremacist hate movement. And David, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. It's good to see you guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, we're all surviving.
So I guess my big question, and I know Carrie has her own, my big question is, have the arrest of the last few days, right? There's insurrection. This sort of hate movement was so intertwined in that. All the big names were participants, as far as I know. You could probably tell us better. But now a lot of them are starting to get arrested, like the Oath Keepers leadership. How much of this is actually going to hamper them moving forward? Is it going to at least slow them down? Or are they still a clear and present danger today, tomorrow at the inauguration, and in the immediate future?
Yeah, I think they're going to continue to be a danger. It's obviously the arrests have had a pretty powerful effect in tamping down a lot of their activism. I mean, the supposed million militia march that was supposed to take place this weekend was just a total
how many people showed up?
Fail with a capital F,
like 1%.
Zero. I mean, nobody showed up in Washington as far as we can tell, and there were just handfuls at these state capitals. And so, yeah, I think that it was a combination of the arrests and also just, I think, the general response to the insurrection, the way the nation sort of reeled back in horror, and everybody, and suddenly these guys are like, oh, that Nazi, and what movie was it? He says, are we the bad guys?
I think it actually surprised them. Because they expected the military to join them and the police.
Yeah, well, their whole conception of themselves, and this is a lot of why they were attacking police officers who were stopping them from entering the Capitol, is fundamentally heroic. I mean, they see themselves as saving the Republic from these nefarious communists, Chinese communists that are trying to take us over. I mean, that's literally what Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, is telling people on December 15th. And that, not only that, but they are, they're saving they're defending the Constitution. That's why they call themselves Oath Keepers. They're keeping the oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic, right? And you heard them actually say that as they were entering the Capitol. While they were in some of those videos that we saw. I think somebody said it right in that New Yorker video that recently came out. And it was, to me, that's the right-wing extremists that I've known for 30 years. They all see themselves as heroes. The self-conception of heroism is really fundamental to them. And that's why, so much of their enterprise revolves around engendering enemies, because you can't be a hero without an enemy. And so this is why they sort of invented the deep and dark nefarious threat of Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all this, and they're actually secretly communists, right? And this is what was in all their heads when they entered the Capitol on January 6th.
Can I just ask then? So I buy into them, of course. I mean, I'm not doubting what you're saying, but I buy into them being, full of this perception of self-heroism, right?
Right.
But did they really think they were going to be universally sort of well received? That like the nation was going to be, oh, thank God, they stormed the Capitol, took it over, and took back America. They thought that would be broadly popular, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is really kind of a fundamental component of right-wing authoritarian personalities that, there are basically three what we call attitudinal and behavioral clusters that comprise right-wing authoritarianism. The first is authoritarian submission to the great leader, right? And the second is authoritarian aggression directed against anyone who doesn't submit. And the third, and maybe most important component, is conventionalism. They believe that they represent the real America, and they believe that there are millions of people out there and that the silent majority quietly supports them. And that's very much, they certainly believed that the cops were on their side. And this is something really endemic to the Proud Boys in particular, because they did a lot of back of the blue stuff during the protests this summer, and have been, when I covered all these events in Portland and Seattle and other places where Proud Boys were marching, they were always, real buddy with the cops. We even saw, I think, in one of the Portland events, the Oath Keepers helping to arrest an anti-fascist demonstrator who they held for the police, and the police were thankful for their help. And this was the kind of stuff that people who were reporting on this were seeing all along, that the cops actually were taking the side of these Proud Boys as long as there were leftists out there in the street to oppose them. But as soon as it was just the Proud Boys and the cops, it became a very different scene, because suddenly it became very apparent to the cops that, hey, there's not both sides breaking the law here. There's only one side breaking the law, and our job is to stop it.
Right.
So
let me ask something. So that's a little off the beaten path. It occurred to me, which is, now that a lot of the right wingers have been sort of deplatformed by a bunch of these, tech companies. What do you? I would argue that it's decreased. In fact, there's already been studies that even just taking Trump off has decreased the amount of disinformation on the internet. Of course, the downside, and I think that is very valuable, is to just not have so much disinformation at one's fingertips all the time. Right. That if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, you actually have to search for the rabbit hole, right? So, but what the downside of this, of course, is that law enforcement agencies have had to work harder now. I've just seen these reports, these headlines where it's harder for law enforcement now to sort of keep track of these right-wing groups, and it's gonna get harder because they've been pushed more into the dark corners, right? Yeah. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. Is it a worthwhile trade-off to have less disinformation but have law enforcement have to work harder? And do you think there are implications?
Yeah, in fact, I wrote a post about this for Daily Kos. That's quite all right, but folks can go back and take a look. I think that deplatforming is a useful tool, but it's a blunt instrument. it can be useful for particularly turning off the spigot of disinformation and misinformation that flows from these cesspits, including Donald Trump's account. And so, and that really is a good thing, because, as you mentioned, there's certainly powerful indications that just shutting off that account had a significant effect. Although that study was a little problematic because it didn't actually take into account the fact that these platforms had not just shut down Donald Trump, they'd also booted off something like 70,000 different accounts that were spewing this stuff.
Oh, they're little baby Trumps. They're Trump Juniors.
Yeah. And they were a significant part of that, 73% of disinformation that disappeared. But overall, yeah, that's absolutely a good thing. And removing all those voices was a good thing, and really was long overdue. In fact, Facebook still is. In fact, that's the post I'm writing for Kos today that I need to get to Barb before too long, because I'm kind of running behind. But yeah, Facebook is still refusing to keep to take any culpability for the significant role that it played in providing a platform for these people to recruit and radicalize and organize this insurrection, because a lot of the organizing that went on prior to the event was taking place on Facebook. And yet Sheryl Sandberg comes on Reuters the other day and says, oh, well, I think most of the organizing was actually taking place on these smaller platforms like Telegram. And it's like, no. Actually, those places came later after the insurrection, because that's where everybody has fled to. But they were taking place on your platform, lady, and you need to take ownership of it. And that's part of the problem, is that nobody does want to really take ownership of this stuff because they don't want to take, recognize their larger responsibility. What?
Also potential legal liability as well as moral liability. But I mean, you've been covering the far right movement for 30 years or so, right? Yeah. That was before there was Facebook, before there was Twitter, before there was even probably the internet, right? So turning off the internet on these people, which is impossible, because they're going to find their corners of the dark web to do their thing. But it does limit that growth potential. But they still have the ability to exist, because they did before the internet.
Yeah, and that was the point of my post that I wrote for Kos, was that it's a blunt instrument. It's useful, but it's not a substitute for the very hard work of actually going after and confronting this problem head on.
Right, I mean, that's my next question, though, because Obama administration, right at the beginning, they actually tried to do something about the growing right-wing threat, and Republicans flipped out, right? Because they said military, right? Because some of them were ex-military. And that was the excuse they did, right? They're disrespecting our troops.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're not going to be able to say crap this time around. Is this really the first real concerted effort that we're going to see to try to dismantle those militias? Yeah,
well, one can hope. I mean, as I wrote for Kos the other day, it's actually illegal in all 50 states for there to be these private armies. They are actually against the law. There are laws on the books in every state in the union that prohibit private vigilante armies. These laws date back to mostly the turn of the 20th century, when they were mostly a response to robber barons sending in private armies of armed thugs, Pinkertons, and people like that to attack labor organizers. But they are there, they exist, and they actually have a perfectly good founding, which is that these vigilante militias are accountable to no one. And that is not anything the framers ever had in mind. A lot of the way they get away with what they do is that they've buffaloed everybody with a lot of Second Amendment bullshit. Saying that has kind of, hornswoggled people into thinking, oh, the Second Amendment protects the existence of these militias. It does not. And so what the problem is, and I actually wrote to Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General of Washington State, because Washington has some very robust anti-militia laws on the books. And I said, Bob, is there a reason that you cannot or can't or won't take the initiative of prosecuting and outlawing these vigilante militias? And he said, they replied to me that unfortunately in Washington State, and it's probably the case in many other states, the Attorney General doesn't actually have primary purview over jurisdiction in those cases, and so it's actually up to the law enforcement agencies to enforce these laws. So one of the things, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about getting for the Biden administration to confront this white supremacist issue by passing federal laws that I don't think are actually going to make a dime's worth of difference, or worse yet, more frighteningly, getting the CIA involved. That's a really bad idea. And then finally, there are, there's been a lot of talk about, having a 9/11 style commission to examine the problem. And I think that could be helpful if it actually is serious. And I'm not sure it would be.
So what you're saying then is that you have county sheriffs had that jurisdiction then,
and state police officers. These
county sheriffs are probably out in rural areas where the militias are, right? So they might even be one and the same.
In certain cases, particularly if your sheriff is a CSPOA sheriff, then yes, you have somebody who's working hand in glove with the militias.
Wait, what kind of sheriff?
An outfit called CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, is run by Richard Mack. They are aligned with the Bundy type patriots. They preach that the sheriff is the supreme law of the land and that he can overrule federal laws in his county and ignore the presence of FBI agents.
I mean, that tells me federal response is the only real solution then.
Well, I think that I think it's actually could be part of an opportunity of a larger initiative to reform police enforcement across the country. I think that I don't think we're going to be able to actually enforce. I mean, it's really a pretty simple solution. We could just enforce the laws that are on the books. It's already against the law to threaten to assassinate a federal official. It's against the law to threaten to hang the president of the United States. And it's against the law to share book or bomb making plans with your pals on the internet. And yet all this kind of stuff has been going on, not just during Trump's years, but really I've been seeing it happen for the last 30 years. And the cops, these laws are not enforced. And so yes, there has to be a robust federal response to actually enforce the laws that are on the books. But there also needs to be an initiative to, I think, reform policing in America in a way that, first of all, we get rid of the white supremacists who are in our police departments. And secondly, we encourage and train police departments. We provide the money for the training if we need to, and we probably should, for hate crimes training, which is a huge gap that's part of this picture. And, just reshape American law enforcement so that it actually takes this stuff seriously.
My very loose understanding, and this is just honestly, I haven't done a ton of research, was that part of the problem with federally charging these folks is that the laws that you say exist on the books doesn't allow you to go after sort of the whole group and dismantle the whole group, right? It just allows you to go after the one person or the few people who are associated with that particular threat. And I've heard arguments that really could help enable federal enforcement if they had a law that allowed them to more broadly address these issues rather than just sort of this whack-a-mole situation. I don't know if you agree with that.
I think that, and actually, for a period, I was pretty sympathetic to the laws. I mean, let's be clear. Right now, it's not possible. There is not a federal law against domestic terrorism,
Right.
and and this was a gap that was built into the Patriot Act, and it probably should be addressed. But I don't want to see it addressed in some half-assed way either, because if you write it vaguely enough, then a law like that is going to be.
It'll be used against Black Lives Matter.
The next time there's a Trump, we're going to be seeing him get away with declaring Antifa and Black Lives Matter terrorist organizations. So you don't want to be if you're going to do that kind of law, you better be sure you've got the safeguards in there that don't let it be used, particularly as we've seen historically from the federal government, particularly the FBI, against communities of color and immigrant communities. That's the way typically we've seen these kind of laws get used. It's travesties, of course, their original intent, but that's what I fear would happen with this kind of law. And so, I mean, yeah, we could talk about it, but you better do it right.
So, Dave Neiwert, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Dave Neiwert, I keep pronouncing Neiwert.
That's quite all right.
You can catch
everybody gets it wrong, Marcos. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, but I've only known you about 20 years, right?
Hey, did you see the Kraken meme I posted?
So, you can catch David's work on Daily Kos. You could also just put his name into Amazon search bar, and he's written a couple dozen books.
9 books.
9 books on sort of the hate movement over the years.
So 8 books on the hate movement and 1 book about orcas.
David, always such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, likewise, guys.
Man, I just always, one of these days, I think I may go back and I may try to see who were the Republicans who screamed bloody murder when the Obama administration proposed this task force to look into right-wing violence, because there's a lot of blood in a lot of people's hands, and Chuck Todd actually brought up the assassination attempt on Gabby Giffords as a beginning, and there's been so many in the years that it's lost in the clutter, right? I was like, oh yeah,
right.
Yeah,
right.
It sort of did. I disagree that was the beginning. As David pointed out, he's been covering this for about 30 years. This has been an ongoing threat, but it was sort of an escalation, right? It was actual political violence of the kind that you don't see in this country, and it sort of shattered one of those norms, and sort of presaged all the norms that would be shattered. So I'm afraid of what the future holds when it comes to political violence. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, to your point though, and I don't know that I don't have the faintest idea of the best way to go about this, but to your point, like with many things, the Biden administration has an opportunity to address this now, because every Republican who comes out and says, "Oh, that's a terrible idea," if you target right-wing extremists, they don't have a leg to stand on, right? So it does provide this opportunity in this moment to actually go after it rather concretely, and be pretty bold about it. And any pushback you get, that person, just they don't. Sorry, we're not ceding the conversation to you, because this posture is exactly what got us to the insurrection at the Capitol. So you may support that, but the rest of us don't. Yeah, so
there will be a lot of whataboutisms, though. What about Black Lives Matter? As though stealing a TV at Target,
you know what?
Is somehow analogous.
No, let me just say, okay, great. Black Lives Matter didn't storm the Capitol and murder people.
Simply, that's that simple.
So go ahead with that whataboutism, because that is such a pile of bullshit. I'm sorry, but there is no comparison now to what the right-wing extremists did. And when people send pipe bombs, and when it's not, we don't see, I'm not saying, no bad behavior pops up here and there. There's always people looking to capitalize on a moment when there's protests, when everybody leaves, and, there's always people looking to capitalize on that moment to do some damage to something or whatever. But nothing even close to what Trump's cultists did. Nothing even close.
No. And the irony is that if anybody had an actual grievance in this country, it is people that are fighting for the lives of Black Americans. Carrie, That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining me. This was an incredible show. Thanks to Chuck Todd and Dave Neiwert, our guest. Also, thank you to Walter Einenkel for producing this show. See you guys at 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern every Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.